Being an underdog is a strength. Challenges and disadvantages can fuel determination, resourcefulness, and creativity, giving underdogs an edge. What is up, champions? Welcome to another episode of Champion Reads, where we talk about best-selling books and their best principles to help you out with your best life. My name is Willie Blake, as one of your hosts, and our other host, Mr. Ian Sturmer, is with us, and we are excited as we, this wonderful Friday morning, jump into our new book for this month, which is, got it right here, boom, Underdog Advantage by Dean Graziosi. This is, I remember it was 2020 when I first heard about this book. It was when Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi, they got together, they created their mastermind.com thing where they helped whoever signed up for it to learn what a mastermind is, how to create one, how to create an event off of it, et cetera, et cetera. And while in there, Dean gave the book PDF away. And so I started reading it and I'm like, wow, this resonates a lot, because as someone who back then was just up and coming, trying to learn, being the underdog, it was truly, truly just resonating with me of you got the big people doing what they're doing, but then you got the underdog who might be unappreciated. People just miss by glance, but if not caught, they are going to fly past their competition and truly turn their disadvantages and their challenges into superpowers and advantages. So today we're going to discuss really the broad topic of being an underdog. Ian and I will share stories that we have that are from the book and from our own lives and just have a great discussion with it. So Ian, I'm just going to throw it right over to you with how you enjoying the book. Tell me some things about it.
Yeah, loving it so far. Thanks. Yeah. Just the whole idea of being an underdog. And I guess what hit me first with it is everybody starts out as an underdog. Every company, every business, everything we do starts as an underdog. It starts not having that reputation, those resources, that background. So we all have to begin with nothing or almost nothing, no matter what we're doing in life. HP, huge corporation, started with two guys in a garage. Apple started with two guys in a garage. They didn't start with $10 million in funding and sponsors and all of these things. So I think as we look at it, it resonates because, hey, that's me. I'm the underdog. I'm hoping to move beyond underdog, but right now that's who I am. And that's actually great because it gives me the freedom to do anything I want to. He mentions this story in there about Coke. So Coke did years and years of testing and came up with a formula that people liked more than the regular Coke. And they called it New Coke. And it bombed because Coke was Coke and people were not willing to change that. But how many companies now come out with new flavors of soda and they start businesses, they get successful because they're not saddled with all of that baggage that Coca-Cola was. So when we're looking at starting our businesses, we're not saddled with a reputation that we need to follow. We have the ability to pivot, to change, to make whatever we want. Um, Willie, you're the dyslexic coach, dyslexic champion. Um, I was reading your title at the bottom, host of Champion Reads. Um, but you can put in there dyslexic dad, and that's no one's going to say, well, you can't do that. You could put in there weight loss coach, and no one's going to say you can't do that. That's not what you're good at, because you're still the underdog. You can do anything you want, and there's nothing to lose. You're not going to lose the billions of dollars that Coca-Cola could. So I think that's the first part, is being an underdog is freedom. It's allowing you to make choices. It's allowing you to try things without that, excuse me, that huge risk of failure that the established corporations already have.
Yeah, here we go. Gary V. I was trying to remember who it was. Gary Vaynerchuk, way back when he was working in his father's store, he told the story to where he had the wine, and he would have friends from high school come in, who, not during high school, obviously, but friends later in life from high school come in, and he was just in the back serving them, putting the wine into their trunk, and they were laughing at him because he was working and didn't have the life that they had. But Gary knew in the back of his mind, I'm going to create something. And then he created Wine Library, to where he would taste wines and match them with different foods and such. And then it became this massive big thing. And then he started going into social media and marketing. Just like you said, when that happened, most everybody who was with him, and especially at Wine Library, told him, stay in your lane. What do you know about social media? What do you know about marketing? And now he could be like, he's one of the top experts in social media and marketing. But back then, everyone was like, stay in your lane, stay small. How many of us have heard that as champions ourselves? Stay small, stay where you're at. Because if you achieve something great, that means I don't have an excuse for why I didn't achieve something. Ooh, that hit deep. It's that underdog advantage of when people just are underestimating you, not seeing you, that you're able to just take pivots and move forward a lot faster without judgment from other people. And of course, there's judgment, but the world isn't looking at you. When I was doing back in 2018, I was married for a year at that point, and my wife and I went to go work at Walmart. And back at the time, they weren't doing hiring at the store, but they were hiring on their remodel team. And so I went on the remodel team, and there was about 24 of us that were there. As we started working, they treated me like trash. I hate to say that. Not Walmart, but the individuals that were there over me just treated me like anyone else. Like, I forced to do it. They hated when I take breaks, but they had to give me a break. But then something changed. I went in and started doing more, started integrating things that I've learned, started picking up things, and just like absorb like a sponge all this knowledge. A month goes by, and one of the main corporate people that came in that did remodels saw that in me then. And then he's just like, dude, can you be here at 3 a.m. instead of 6? I have a special project that we need to work on. And I'm like, sure. So him, myself, and then one other person, we came in, and we were just this like dynamic duo of putting up the gun safe and setting up the bike rack, and like these massive projects that he would not trust with anyone else, then trusted with me. And Walmart, several department heads saw that as well and offered me a job. And it was like, I went in just learning, just being so curious and absorbing everything. And because I did that and adapted and adjusted, then I stood out over everybody else. So that's the story I got.
there's a really important lesson in what you just said there. When we talk about an underdog is not someone who doesn't have success. An underdog is not someone who is small. If that was the case, everyone that was on that refit team that you were on would be underdogs, and they're not. You were an underdog. And the difference is you had a plan, you had a desire, you had goals. And I think that's the difference between an underdog and a lazy bum dog, to use technical terms here. um, I mean, it's no problem at all. It's easy to not have anything. It's easy to not be successful. It's easy to not have achieved things in life. But an underdog is the one who is putting forth the effort, who sets those goals, who works towards it, but hasn't achieved them yet. And that's a big key to what he says here. You know, the author goes through a lot of examples in his own life, from racing snowmobiles was an example. He was the underdog. He didn't have all of the money and the mechanics and the tools and the parts and everything that these big companies he was racing against had. What he did have was a huge desire to be, excuse me, to be the best. And he went and he researched, he talked to people, he got everything he could. He put in all the work for it and applied all those things and came out ahead. And I think that's the underdog story. It's starting without any of those advantages, but having that overwhelming desire to achieve, that work ethic to achieve, and not willing to stop until you achieve that. Excuse me. So I think that's the part of the underdog that I guess I didn't really think about. I just think about, oh, it's the one that nobody heard of before. But not only that, it's the one that's worked harder than everyone else to achieve something. Didn't stop when people said no. The people that said, oh, you need to stay here with me. You need to be in the trenches with me, not, going out to achieve something great and wonderful. Not holding that jealousy that other people might have around you. But having that work ethic, that desire, those goals, to not let any of that stand in your way. So I guess, the work ethic, I think, is a big part of that underdog, because otherwise you're just a lazy dreamer if you're not willing to put in the effort for it.
You know that if you're not willing to put in the effort, what underdog story is there? Like there's not. And I've never thought about this before. Are you considered an underdog if you're not working towards something? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. Because if you're not working towards something, I think the definition of the underdog is that you are doing the same actions that or around the same actions that your competitors are doing. You're doing the same thing, but you are undervalued in what you can do. These are very real thoughts, which is why I'm stumbling. So if you're an underdog, you are taking action. If you're not taking action and you're not doing something, then you're not an underdog. You're just someone who's stagnant, standing in place. And I think that's what resonated the most with me in this book, is that with the individual who is going and moving, they need to know how to adapt. They need to know how to just have grit and determination to move forward. And you nailed it. Just like in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's book, the first principle is desire. You need to start with that desire, because then that desire turns into determination, and that determination then turns into discipline. The underdog has the discipline, but it started with desire and didn't sit with desire, because if you just have a desire for something and don't do anything with it, that's a dream. That's a wish, something that's not going to come. but then you put it into, I'm going to do this, I'm dedicated to this cause, and then put the discipline into it. I think that's a good mixture of being like the difference between the person who is out there doing it, which is the underdog, versus the person who's just sitting there and simply being a dreamer.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So maybe a bad example from my life. For a few years, I owned a little bagel shop, and I could be the underdog bagel shop. I was not the big chain that was down the street from me. I was just one little local shop that bought my bagels from a bagel bakery in a town over. But I was not an underdog because I wasn't trying to be better than everyone else. I was trying to be a good enough place that people would come to. I wasn't. I didn't set a goal to be the best bagel shop ever. I didn't work at doing that. Instead, I went for good enough, and that's something we should never do. That's not an underdog. That's a lazy guy who's gets by. If you go down the street and you look at all the restaurants that are out there, a couple of them will be famous for how good their dishes are. But most of these local restaurants are good enough. Somebody thought it would be a good business. They enjoy cooking, so they got a grill and they made hamburgers. But they didn't try to be the absolute best. They just thought it was a good enough business. Not putting down any restaurants out there, but why do some become famous and become great places, and others just are there? And what do we do in our life? Are we just there, or do we stand out? You went to Walmart and you stood out because you wanted to be the best you could at that. You wanted to put forth the effort. You didn't just show up like everyone else, do what you're told and go home and say, oh, that's good enough. An underdog, but this is a goal to achieve. You wanted to put it in there. You wanted to no longer be just like everybody else. And I think maybe that's the second part of underdog. You've got to have a desire to not be the underdog anymore. It's great to have that. There's an advantage in being an underdog, but the goal is to be big enough that you're not that anymore. Now, he goes into the mentality of it that we want to try and hang on to. But the goal of an underdog is to not be an underdog anymore. It's to be the champion in it. And I think in my mind, the greatest underdog story out there is Rocky. The movie. He was nobody important, nobody great. An opportunity fell into his lap, but then he seized that. He took it. He could have just trained like normal, gotten a whole bunch of money for being in this fight, and gotten some fame and enjoyed that. But instead, he went and dove into it with everything he had, and gave it all to be able to win. And I love that movie because he didn't win in the end. He made it to the end of it, which was a huge accomplishment, and it just showed his success that way. But you've got to have that desire. You've got to want to be more than you are and put forth the effort to really be an underdog. It's not just being small. It's not being not good enough or not big enough. It's not caring that you're too small or not big enough or not rich enough or not handsome enough or whatever else it happens to be, but doing it anyways and putting everything into it to no longer be an underdog.
Yeah. The underdog doesn't want to be the underdog. They want to be the overdog. They want to be the ones up there in front of everybody. Dean, I don't know, I haven't heard it in the book yet, but one of my favorite stories from Dean is he's on a fishing he went to a mastermind with individuals like Lewis Howes, Tom Bilyeu, his wife Lisa, and just like all the Russell Brand, Richard Brand, wait, no, Russell Branson, all these fantastic individuals, leaders in their industry. And one of the, I think it was Russell's mastermind. And what he shared was there was a fishing competition, and he got matched with Lewis, and the competition was getting the most fish. And so during the day when they were fishing, Dean would cast it in, not get anything. And he's like, okay, maybe I need to throw it further or in a different direction. So he casts it again, and it's like, okay, that's not working. So let's pivot. Looks like the fish are more closer to the dock. So I'm going to cast it closer to the dock. Oh, there's more fish over there. So then he moves places and does it. And after the whole fishing time that they had, he went from the one who wasn't catching any fish at the beginning, he saw other people catching fish, to then getting first place, which was catching so many fish. And everybody there was thinking, dude, I didn't know you were such a great fisher. I had no idea. And he's like, honestly, I'm not. I just adapted to the situation and continued to learn. I love that, because that is the essence of what we're talking about. It doesn't even have to be this big grand amount of time of going from zero to the biggest company in the world. It could be in the small moments that are just a couple days or even hours of where you were undervalued and then adjusted and adapted because nobody saw you as competition, to then coming in first place. One of my favorite examples is in my life with one of my friends. He hates playing video games with me because he knows that if we play long enough, that because of how great I am at adapting and learning, that I always beat him. And he absolutely hates it. He hates it because the one I'm thinking of is when we're playing Halo, and we start out, he plays Halo a lot, and so he's just like crushing me. But then as the time goes on, I start to get the same amount of kills, and then start winning him. And then towards the end, he's just like, dude, I give up. You just learn way too fast. And so it's not even the big times. It's the moments that every single day you just adjust and pivot and continue to move. Because when you do that, ain't nobody seeing you, but they'll definitely see you when you're holding that first place trophy.
Definitely true. Yeah, being able to adapt, not letting those things stand in your way, learning from the best around you. Um, that's the key to success. Again, I forget the book I was reading about that, but the story in it was he had gone and got a job in a factory, the author, and he got promoted really fast. And people said, well, how did you get promoted so fast? He goes, well, when I got to the factory, I went to the person who had been in the factory the longest and asked him the best way to do things. And everybody else that got a job there avoided the people that were the long timers because they didn't want to look dumb in front of them. They didn't want people to know that they didn't have an answer. So yeah, the secret is you go to somebody who knows what they're doing and you ask them, and they'll tell you, and you learn from it, and you start applying those things. And that's the underdog. When you find out the information, you learn, you struggle and grow, because the information is out there for basically any industry you're in. There's somebody out there doing it that's done it well, and you can learn things from them and apply them to your life, your business, and grow with that. But we're afraid to be that underdog, that outlier. When we were looking up quotes for the beginning of this, I came across one that I don't think is from the book, but it said, everyone loves an underdog story. Nobody wants to be the underdog. Yeah, we all love the story about the little guy who comes out and wins. I mean, how many Rocky movies are there? Not just Rocky, but Rocky-esque movies out there. where the little guy, through perseverance, wins. But how many of us are willing to step in and put ourselves on the line, and put forth the effort and put our reputation out there and risk our livelihood, our money, our time, our, the skin on our knuckles? How much are we willing to risk to say that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to succeed, I don't care what they say? And that it's that desire, it's that gumption. Do we still people still use that word? You gotta have the gumption. You gotta have the grit. You don't know. Okay, kids these days. Okay, I'm going to start using that word more. Gumption. If I'm using that word wrong, people can let me know in the chat. But yeah, it's No, sorry. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because if you never put yourself out there, you'll never succeed. You can't succeed by doing exactly the same thing everyone else does, because you'll get exactly the same result everyone else has, and you'll be right squarely in the comfortable middle of the pack. And if you're happy there, great. But if you want more in life, you've got to have that desire. You got to be willing to put in the effort. You got to be willing to have people laugh at
you. That. And as we wrap up our thoughts here, the ones I want to leave goes back to, you start with the desire. You got to start with the desire. From Napoleon Hill to Dean Graziosi to Tony Robbins to everybody, you got to start with the desire. Because if you don't have a desire for something, why do you need to change? You don't. So you got to have that desire. But then don't just be a dreamer. Don't just be a wisher. Move towards dedication. Go from desire to dedication. You're going to commit to something and then push it into the realm of discipline. Because when you move it forward into the realm of discipline, then you just start doing the little things. And whether it's a couple hours to where you have your underdog story, or a couple days, or several years before it happens, just move forward one step each day, from desire to dedication to discipline. Ian, I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
Yeah. So as we were talking, excuse me, remind me of a quick story. Did you ever hear about the Fosbury flop?
No.
Nope. Okay. Dick Fosbury was a high jumper, Olympic high jumper. So when somebody does the high jump and they like jump over with their back over it, so they're facing the sky when they do a high jump. People didn't used to do that. They used to jump over it head first, looking down. For decades, centuries, people did that. But Dick Fosbury figured out that he could kind of turn and flip around backwards and get higher. Looked stupid. They called it the Fosbury flop because it looked so ridiculous. Now everybody does that because one person finally stood up and said, hey, there's a better way to do this. Now everyone does that. So that's the underdog. Don't be afraid to be the one that is different, the one that tries something new. Because if Dick Fosbury did that and he got a shorter or a lower score than the other people, nobody would care except maybe his mother. He would not be in the history books for trying something new that didn't work. It would be forgotten and no one would ever care about it. So when you're an underdog, failure doesn't matter. It's not that failure is not an option. It's failure doesn't matter. You just, if it doesn't work, you move on to the next one. You find a new way. And that's one of the greatest advantages, is you have nothing to lose by putting it all out there. And that's, I guess that's my closing statement. If you have nothing to lose, you can only succeed.
There you go. Well said. Now, with that, champions, that wraps up this episode of Champion Reads. If you found inspiration in this, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, as well as you can go to our website, mychampionscircle.com, where you'll find the link to our podcast, link to our socials, and everything else going in the Champion Circle universe. Till next time, champions, continue to be awesome. Be the champions in your own lives, and always remember, being the underdog is a strength. So go forward with what you are going to create and learn that failure just doesn't really matter and that you can create what you want. We'll see you on the next episode of Champion Reads.